Good day, colleagues. My name is Dr. Pascal Taruvinga. I'm currently the Chief Heritage Officer for Robben Island World Heritage Site in South Africa. I would like to congratulate the organizers and partners of the 7th Ray Symposium for 2020, which is being held at the Natural History Museum in Bulawayo, the second capital city of Zimbabwe. Special thanks goes to the organizers, Riche Yangso, also known as RAYS, and their partners, the Natural History Museum and the Regional Office of UNESCO for Southern Africa, ROSA, ICROM, and many other partners of this initiative. I would like to focus on the theme of this symposium, which is sustainable development and heritage in Africa, or heritage and sustainable development goals in Africa. This topic has always been relevant from the past, and it remains so in the present. And in my discussion, I'm going to be focusing on localizing sustainable development dimensions, resilience, and integration approaches in managing heritage resources in Africa. As you may be aware, conservation and sustainable development have received attention in the last decade, yet the two are as old as humanity itself. In Africa, there is a long history of caring for both heritage and well-being of society by local communities. Yet these communities have been marginalized in the management of heritage in Africa. Caring for heritage refers to conservation, while well-being refers to the health, prosperity, happiness of the society. Both are the functions of how heritage is used by communities. The adoption of sustainable development in this century does not fully consider that local communities in Africa have experiences in conserving and using their own heritage, and this was done through traditional management systems. When you look at traditional management systems, they define the resilience and integrative approaches applied to bring together conservation and use of heritage over millenniums by local communities. Therefore, we cannot even talk about localizing sustainable development without integrating it with traditional management systems in Africa. It is a scientific error to do that, as heritage remains a local phenomenon before it becomes subjected to such universal frameworks which are devoid of local experiences. In my discussion, I will look at these local experiences as embedded in the traditional management systems, as well as their cross-cutting application in promoting sustainable conservation and use of heritage in Africa, even at sites such as Matobo World Heritage Site in Bulawayo. Perpetuating global needs without integrating local experiences and needs is likely to be catastrophic in the management of heritage in Africa. And also, when you look at localization of sustainable development in Africa, you realize that it's a top-to-down approach that is used, where communities are told how they can use their resources, when they can harvest the resources. But this needs to be replaced by the bottom-up approach, as the future of the conservation in Africa lies in its adaptive ability to facilitate conservation and the well-being of society at the same time. And when you look at the traditional management systems in Africa, they cut across a number of dimensions that are very, very important in terms of localizing sustainable development in Africa. One of them is that we're going to talk about conservation and sustainable development hubs. We're also going to talk about heritage and sustainable influencers. We're also going to talk about how to empower young people as decision makers on conservation and development issues. When you look at Africa and the timing of this symposium in 2020, which is focusing on young people, it's a befitting topic and a befitting audience, in that when you look at the African population, the fastest growing age category in Africa is young people. These are the future leaders. These are the future decision makers of the continent. They are going to be at the helm of heritage institutions in Africa, and they are going to be the politicians of the future in Africa. So we need to bring them on board as quickly as possible. And we are endowed in Africa with a diverse cultural and natural heritage, some of which it is recognized as World Heritage, some of it is recognized as wetlands, biospheres, cultural landscapes, protected areas, and some of it is recognized at the local level, which means it's relevant to the local communities. When you look at the context of this heritage, you can see that it cannot be separated from local communities. Communities are the creators and the owners, and are the same people that sustain the cultural practice that what we are calling heritage nowadays. But when you look at the African continent, and especially during the colonial time, the colonial governments, they introduced what we can call state-based management systems. These are systems that are supported by legislation, systems that are supported by institutions that are empowered by legislation. But these institutions, they do not necessarily represent the communities. They are managed from a legal perspective. And local communities are only involved as part and parcel of consultation, not actually being involved from the beginning to the end. So you can see that the colonial period led to a situation where heritage was appropriated as a legal resource and the communities were marginalized. But the same communities, they're actually surviving on resources that are around the heritage sites themselves. For example, if you look at Matopo's World Heritage Site in Zimbabwe, the biodiversity, the fauna and flora is medicinal value, and communities used to use that. And some of it was part of food, the tubers and the vegetables that they would get from the fauna and flora. But legislation came and then they were told that they have to leave Matopos. But they have that experience that we have not tapped into. So what I'm arguing against is that the abstract transfer of the knowledge into the present lacks the social dimension and the empirical context of how heritage has evolved in Africa. The communities that we see in Africa have empirical evidence of applying sustainable uses of heritage. For example, if you look in Zambia, the shift in cultivation, they knew how to plant a certain field for 7 years and then leave it fallow to recover. That's sustainable use. And even when you look at communities in many African countries, they know when to go and fish and which kind of fish to catch and in which season. These are all dimensions of sustainable utilization of resources. Even with hunting, they knew which animals to hunt and which ones not to hunt, and when to use fire to allow vegetation to regenerate within the forest. It's part of sustainable use, but all these dimensions, they have not been really considered in localizing dimensions of sustainable development in Africa. So what I'm trying to say is that in as much as heritage is inseparable from the intangible, or the tangible is inseparable from the intangible, also heritage and meeting the well-being of society is inseparable. Conservation and use of heritage in the present cannot be separated. So heritage has to come on board and begin to offer solutions to how we can use heritage in a sustainable way. And when you look at these global processes like your World Heritage Convention and the localizing of the Sustainable Development Goals, the development of the World Heritage Policy on Sustainable Development, you can see that these are top-to-down processes that are reinforcing concepts that we've seen in Africa, the concept of creating the Gardens of Eden, where communities are not allowed to do anything, where communities are not allowed to partake in the decision-making process of how these sites must be used. So in a way, when we talk about localizing sustainable development, we are saying how do we recover from the lost opportunity of embracing local perspectives and interpretation of heritage, including how sustainable development is actually interpreted by local communities. We look at in Shona or in Zimbabwe, or even among the Ndebele's community, there's the whole concept of saying Ramangwana for tomorrow, the future. The future or Ramangwana is actually referring to a sustainable mindset, to say if you are consuming anything, you have to leave something for tomorrow. And that's why you see even communities, they have these grain bins where they store maize or millet for use in the next season. It's all these principles of sustainable use and thinking about the future. So sustainable development did not start with the introduction of legislation or policies, but it started with the cultural practices and the lifestyles of communities in Africa. And coming back to the youth, that is the young people that are the center of our celebration this year, I would like to propose a few things. First of all, I would like to put across the point that localizing dimensions of sustainable development at heritage sites in Africa is still in its infant stages from a policy perspective. So what we need to do is we need to build on the knowledge that is embodied in traditional management systems of communities and integrate it into this policy framework that we are parading and forcing heritage institutions to implement. So therefore, we need to tap in the past, and we need to bring the past into the present. And traditional management system offers such mindsets and tools that can be integrated in the process of localizing sustainable development processes. And one of the things that is important in this process of integration is documenting and integrating traditional management systems and their dimension. So we need to have research into this area. We need to have universities partnering with heritage institutions and documenting dimensions of traditional management systems and bringing them to the fore in the university curriculum, even education curriculums at primary and secondary schools. And we could then use this information in establishing conservation and heritage hubs. We could even establish heritage and sustainable development influencers, as well as empower local communities. And then the second point that I would like to put across is that while prioritizing the documentation and the recording of traditional management systems, in as far as they relate also to sustainable use of resources, we need to think about good practices and principles that we can translate into local languages that can be understood by local communities in a particular country or in a particular environment. English is not the only language that should be used for communication. For example, in Zimbabwe, we have Ndebele, we have Shona, we have people from Manicaland who speak Ndau, and we have some people in Bedbridge who speak Venda. How much are we translating all these documents and these policies into local languages that are able to be understood by local communities? And when you look also at the legislation review, which is another point in Zimbabwe and elsewhere in Africa, when we do legislation reviews, we are silent on such issues around sustainable development. We are silent on issues such as traditional management systems and how local communities actually perceive their heritage, including how the same local communities would want to be engaged and involved in the management of this heritage. So all I'm saying is that we need to involve communities in reviewing these heritage legislations and make sure that we include the philosophies and the mindsets and the language that they understand. And coming back to the young people, I would like to call them the 5G generation. They are technologically advanced. If you take a young person now, a young child, you give them a cell phone, they are able to navigate and go to YouTube without your assistance. They can even tell you whether the data bundle is finished or not, because it's a new generation. So what I'm saying, if we want to bring young people in issues of heritage and sustainable development, we have to catch them in their own space. We have to use the language they understand. We have to use the medium that they understand. And technology, ICT, information communication technology, is one of those underutilized tools in heritage management in sub-Saharan Africa and Africa at large. If, for example, if you look at young people, they like to play with technology. We have information that they can use to develop games, apps, and so on and so on. I would like to give you an example of what we have been doing at Robben Island, which we continue doing. We are using an approach where we attract influencers. It's a social media term, and it's a term that is well known with those that are on Twitter, Facebook, and so on and so on. You have followers, and we are saying, how do we capitalize on a follower, on followers of an influencer? And at Robben Island in July 2020, we invited a young artist, very vibrant, and has got about 2 million followers worldwide, and his name is DJ Shimza. We asked him to come to Robben Island and do his thing, but at the same time raising awareness on the importance of Robben Island and why we should protect it and why we should conserve it. Music has traditionally been used to pass messages from one generation to another. If you go back into traditional management systems and cultural practices, you realize that music was actually used as a means of communicating, either communicating a funeral or communicating that there's a wedding or people celebrating an achievement. So we are saying, how do we catch the young people using the things that they like, but at the same time, we give them a message that they can spread, which then reaches their followers. So we invited Shimza to host a live jamming session at Robben Island, and we used one of the quarry sites where political prisoners would spend their time enduring the punishment that would have been administered to them by warders. And at the same time, in that quarry site, the ex-political prisoners used also to sing as part of keeping themselves focused on what they were doing. So we're not regenerating anything that has never been done at Robben Island, but we are saying, how do we build on the values of the site and reach to the younger people? So DJ Shimza was the first artist to do a live streaming from Robben Island, and it was watched by about 2 million people, and it was supported by social media platforms and also aired by MTV Base South Africa, so that we reach many people across the world. So he also partnered with another very prominent influencer, and I think most of you might know him because of what happened last year when South Africa won the Rugby World Cup. Sia Kolisi Foundation, they were part of that. So we combined influencers that have got followers, but the message was about heritage. It was about the importance of Robben Island. So why can't we do the same thing with sustainable development and heritage? We get influencers from Zimbabwe. There are a lot of upcoming artists in Zimbabwe who have got followers. How come we can't use them to pass the message that we need to balance the use of heritage and conservation in Africa? So I'm challenging the organizers to think out of the box, and maybe next year you have an influencer running a musical show from Matopos World Heritage Site and streaming it live globally and spreading the message of heritage and sustainable development. So we need to identify heritage influencers from the society, and it must be young people that have got a global reach and followers. Another important aspect that relates to young people is that when you look at traditional management systems, they provide for an intergenerational platforms as part of transmission of information to future decision makers in the society. What am I saying? In the past and even now, communities, they have a way of passing on information to the younger generation before they become adults. And when they become adults, there's also a level of information that is given to them. So here I'm talking about how are we mentoring the young people that we want to be the future leaders of tomorrow. For example, if I take state-based management institutions, they take decisions in boardrooms and then they force them down to society. But here today we are celebrating the young people that are talking about sustainable development. Do they sit in the same boards to make decisions about conservation and sustainable development? I'm not so sure. So what I'm saying, critical to intergenerational capacity in Africa, is that we have to deliberately mentor young people. We need to bring them on board and teach them to make balanced decisions. So we don't want a situation where the dialogue between heritage and sustainable development is controlled by elders and scientists only. We need to bring the young people on board. So the point that I'm making here is that we need to have intergenerational dialogues on conservation and sustainable development in Africa. And we should position these young people as decision makers. And secondly, we also want to have these youth or young people as voices that are lacking in the corridors of power in conservation and development in Africa. And for example, when I look at management boards for heritage institutions in Africa, they don't have young people. It's always the scientists, the politicians, the elderly. I think we have to be deliberate in creating space for young people in our boards and making sure that they learn how to make decisions for the best of the community and for the best of the heritage. And one of the things that I've always been asking myself when I was preparing for this is, when are we going to hand over the future to the young people in Africa? And what kind of foundation that we are giving them as future leaders? Are we allowing them to make informed and decisive decisions today for their benefit and for tomorrow as well? So I would want to reiterate this point, that traditional management systems, they've got elements of mentorship, elements of empowering, elements of sharing information, which all these are lacking today. And even today, I would jealously say it, and also say it with an open heart, that I would have been very happy to have the keynote speaker being a young person who would be giving us this message. So I'm hoping that next year, when Rays hosts the symposium, the keynote speaker will be a young person who will be telling us their view on the particular theme that we are going to be choosing for next year. And as I conclude my discussion on heritage and sustainable and development in Africa, I would like to make the point that discussing this issue is an opportunity for us to connect the past and the present. And I would like to repeat that sustainable development is not a new phenomenon for local communities in Africa. They have always been practicing sustainable utilization of resources, but it was not documented. It was overtaken by state-based management systems. So I would like to correct the misconception that we hear in many conferences, in many meetings, that everything from the past is backward and not sustainable. What I'm putting aboard and across is that not everything from the past is backward. There are good elements, and we can extract principles and guidelines associated with conservation and sustainable development from the past. Such a process or such an approach could help us facilitate steps of adjustment, cooperation, and social exchanges in implementing sustainable development as a social science process at heritage sites. And I would like to reiterate that traditional management processes or approaches are actually a form of some social science that needs equal opportunity in the balancing of conservation and sustainable development in Africa. And today, the message that I'm going to leave you with you is that the future of heritage in Africa is in the hands of young people. These are the influencers. These are the champions. These are the decisions makers. These are the active facilitators of our time. And just like with political parties, you need a politician to win an election. And in our case, we need young people who have become masters in what they can do to become successful in balancing conservation and sustainable development. And I salute all the young people that have participated in this conference, that have developed exhibitions that are on show at the Natural History Museum. And I would also like to thank the partners once more again for supporting this event. And on a personal note, I would like to thank colleagues from South Africa, in particular KEYNOTE, who have helped me do this online presentation. Thank you, KEYNOTE, and thank you for supporting heritage and sustainable development in Africa. Thank you very much.